So I'm with my friend Matt Hugg, who's the president and founder of Nonprofit.Courses and a longtime teacher and speaker on nonprofit management issues, which is a big, big part of the American economy. Matt and I were talking a while ago about the number of people in the United States who are engaged in some way, shape, or form in nonprofits. Matt, how many Americans are actually involved in nonprofits?
Well, actually, we just looked at these numbers the other day, and there's about 1.5 million nonprofits. The average nonprofit board is about 16 people. And then there's another, 14 million, I think, people who are actually employed by nonprofits. So if you do all the math, it's well over 40 million people in the US which are engaged somehow or another in nonprofits. And that doesn't even count the line volunteers, the people who are standing behind the counter and giving out food or delivering groceries, all that kind of stuff.
So it's entirely possible that a banker, for example, who is interested in the financial health and viability of a nonprofit could be talking to lots of people who are very familiar with what's going on in the nonprofit today in this post-pandemic world. And so it's really important, I think, if the banker is going to do his or her job well, to be thinking about the kinds of questions that might be appropriate to ask at this stage. I'm curious, let's take the example where a banker is talking to the head of a nonprofit.
Yeah.
What kinds of things should the banker be exploring at this point in order to really get a feel for how the nonprofit's doing?
Well, the first thing is going to be on the, say, executive director's mind, or whoever you're talking to, is going to be their mission. How is their mission doing? How are they carrying that out? Because there's a lot of incentives for a nonprofit to focus on that, not only because that's what they do, right? You might expect it, but also, when you get to 990 forms and how they're judged in the community, it's actually the ratio of their mission delivery dollars to other things and operations and fundraising that they're judged on. So talking about their mission and getting a sense of that, and how, especially now, given all the issues that are going on, that's number one. That's an important point. I think, obviously, and they're a banker, so folks would expect them to ask about this, is revenue. But not, and we'll kind of cut through a couple of myths here. And one of them is that, first of all, most revenue comes from fundraising. It doesn't. Most nonprofit revenue comes from fee for service. So people pay whatever, some portion of the amount of the service they're getting, although typically not all of it. And then the other, if you're talking about philanthropy, the big myth that comes up there is that most of their money is going to be from grants or foundations or companies or government. And that's simply not the case. Now, if it's if they get government money, it's going to be fee for service. So they're getting paid for operating a daycare center. They get a grant for that. So that's fee for service. But philanthropically, most money, 72, and if you count bequests and all that, well into the 80s, comes from individuals. And so the question is, how are they engaging individuals in their community philanthropically? So that's important to tease out. And then, what are their other revenue sources? Are they diversified or not? And this is some place where bankers can be a big help, just to kind of think through some things for them. After that, talk about community partners. Who else is in the community that is behind them in terms of revenue or activities or whatever, and how can the banker be helpful in either bringing in more community partners or leveraging the community partners they have for a higher level of engagement to help that mission?
So a community partner for an organization might be a nonprofit or a for-profit company that provides an important service to the nonprofit?
Yeah, we're talking about vendors, we're talking about contributors, we're talking about people who, organizations, companies that might benefit from their services, like if they provide employment background services than who is hiring the people who are getting employed, for example.
So one of the issues that's important for a lot of nonprofits today is thinking about how technology is going to enter into their delivery methods going forward, and that's an area where I'm assuming most nonprofits do need partners.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, again, they have to be mission focused. This is really important. And so does technology help enhance their mission directly? Can they apply technology to doing what they do? And in a lot of cases, yes. In a lot of cases, it makes it more efficient. But then also there's back office technology, which and infrastructure to help. And that's really, I think, where a lot of nonprofits have really just need help. I mean, let's face it, tech is expensive. And it's not that the people in nonprofits are Luddites. They're just like anybody else. Some people are really tech savvy, some people aren't. But they are going to face a cost burden that they really have a hard time shifting to their revenue streams. Because a lot of times funders don't like to pay for that infrastructure. They want to pay for mission services, and it's really hard to get them the resources they need to actually carry out that mission, or the behind the scenes stuff like accounting systems, like fundraising systems, like video systems, things like that.
And a number of bankers that I've talked to, when they think about the ways in which they might be able to assist nonprofits, often overlook the fact that their banks have addressed a number of these issues. Banks are very knowledgeable about cybersecurity issues, which could be a major issue for a nonprofit, or they're familiar with how to utilize things like video technology, which might be useful for the nonprofit. So there are a lot of ways that a banker might be able to add value through this kind of discussion.
Definitely. I mean, even something, and it sounds silly, but even something as simple as having a conference room to go to that might have a video